Hey y'all.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good.
Have you been following the large thread?
A little bit, yeah. It's been a lot.
Yeah, it has been a lot. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, how's it going?
Can you still hear me?
I can.
Perfect. Hi, Jordan. I hope I haven't come across as not liking you in any way. It's a
Hey,
heated
ditto.
topic about a topic that I'm very passionate about, and it's not.
So clearly.
I also want to take your feedback into very serious consideration because
I appreciate that.
we don't want to
To be honest, I'm less concerned with our interpretation of each other and more with bystanders' interpretation of either of us. But like,
yeah.
but yeah, I think we're cool.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure that we're not, there's no lingering feelings here.
None at all.
Okay, cool. Great.
Now we're just talking.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So let's get everybody in this call. I don't know how many people we're gonna actually get. There are let's see. Okay, let me that's the APAC call. This is the autofix SIG. I presume you've read the document, right?
No, don't presume that.
Oh, okay. You've not read the proposed specification document then.
No, if you link me to it, I can scan it right now, though.
Yeah. This is the proposed there is a document that is proposed for defining how. So there's the work that like Alpha Omega is doing.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like a more standardized document defining this work in a way that anybody can consume and use. That's not
Cool.
it's not just the OpenSSF, right? And
Right.
so at a high level, we need to make sure that, like, sure, we can have policies and processes that like Open Source Security Foundation or AO has, but like we can't assume those same resources are available to everybody when we're establishing.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. So let me send out the meeting notes. If you could, I gotta make some people not here. Hang on a second. Let me do that real fast because there are people that are not here who are not here. If you could either gray or mark yourself as present by graying in your name, or making your name solid, or if you can add your name if you don't have it in there, that will be great. We need to, in order for this to become an official SIG under the Open Source Security Foundation, we need at least 2-3 weeks of attendance from organizations beyond. We have to have at least 3 organizations or 2 organizations attending any SIG meeting in order for it to be considered, or in order for us to become an actual SIG. So your attendance and marking your attendance helps us become legitimate.
It's true and very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Okay.
So I have been off this week, so I haven't actually been writing any code or barely been joining any AO meeting or not AO meeting, any meetings practically. Let me ping Josh and let me let everybody else know that we're joining right now. We're meeting right now. All right. I have too many Slack instances.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, you're the person I was actually going to ping.
Well, there we go. Yeah, sorry, I missed the calendar notification and I looked up and was like, oh, there's a notification over there.
That also you gotta, I don't know if you noticed this, but you have to copy that calendar invite
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've copied this damn thing a couple of times. Copy to Jonathan Leju. This does not repeat. Why is this not marked as does not? Okay. Repeats. Custom. What's every 2 weeks on Wednesday? Okay, done. Save. Great. Copied and saved. All right. So let's go through the agenda real fast. New friends in intro. Anybody who's new here who's never attended this SIG meeting want to introduce themselves and share who you are and maybe where you work or what brought you here, yada yada. Go for it. You got a hand up. Jordan.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Jordan. I'm contracting for the OpenSSF right now, and I'm a overly prolific NPM maintainer, and that is where my interest comes from here. I got into a very delightfully heated conversation about the automatic reporting plan here, and thought it would be useful to hop into the meeting whenever I can. Yes, passionate, exactly.
Passionate.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Andres Orby. I'm currently a student at NJT, senior, and I don't know. I was just looking to potentially contribute into, securing some open source software in any capacity. So just looking to see to see where I can help.
Perfect. Now, how do you say your name?
Andres.
Andres. Okay. All right. And your name is not on the attendance list yet. Do you need me to send let me send the link again into the chat. Oh, you got it. Beat me to it. Great.
I try to be useful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else new who wants to introduce themselves?
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
My name is Abbas Chitri, and I'm a second year undergrad student from Nepal. And I was just looking for fun stuff, open source contribution and stuff. So I was interested in security also. So I found OpenSSF, and I just joined it. Thanks.
Welcome. So awesome. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Do we have anybody who wants to help scribe our meeting today?
I can volunteer as tribute, I guess.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Okay. Do we have any opens? Anybody want to talk about anything that's not on the schedule, maybe, but yeah. Does anybody have any open topics they want to bring up? Okay. So for the people that are new here, at a high level, this working group, this SIG, so this is a SIG under the so SIG stands for Special Interest Group under the Vulnerability Disclosures Working Group, and we are focused primarily on discussing the topic of automating vulnerability fixing at scale, predominantly through bulk pull request generation, or in some form trying to bulk generate contributions to fix security vulnerabilities at scale across all open source. This work at a high level is the continuation of some of the work that I've been doing starting in 2020 through last year, where I was the first Dan Kaminsky Fellow and bulk generated several hundred pull requests to fix security vulnerabilities such as zip slip, partial path traversal, temp directory hijacking. And I've generated in my career north of 7,000 pull requests to fix various different security vulnerabilities across open source. And so Alpha Omega has hired myself and Yesenia under AO to try to focus on fixing security vulnerabilities at scale. And instead of Alpha Omega kind of just going into this work, you know, not engaging with the OpenSSF and just doing our own thing, we kind of want to come up with a set of standards and best practices for doing this work in a way that is inclusive of both security researchers and also maintainers. And I'm not the only one that's been doing this work. Trellix and Casimir, who's on the call, has also engaged in this sort of work to generate pull requests at scale to fix security vulnerabilities. GitHub is engaged in some of this work in the past to do this when there was a CVE in a popular C library that got revendered in a lot of libraries. And so they used a bot that I wrote. But we want to come up with a set of policies and processes to establish norms around how we can do this work in a way that minimizes harm to maintainers, but still actually gets the vulnerabilities fixed and still but at the same time also keeping in mind that like we are dealing with vulnerabilities at scale. For example, Casimir, you generated what, 60-something thousand pull requests?
65,000, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 65,000 pull requests. And so trying to keep in mind that humans getting involved in that sort of scale is a very tedious process, especially when you don't have a large company or organization behind you. If it's just you doing this work, how can we enable others to do this kind of work at massive scale and have a positive impact on the security of the industry, but do so in a way that's respectful of maintainers? So that is the high level sort of overview of this SIG. Does anybody have any questions off of the tail end of that?
Thoughts, but I can wait.
It's fair. So there to kind of give an overview, in that endeavor, we have a specification doc, which is linked in the meeting notes, where we are intending or attempting to define what is defining like what is an open source security foundation compliant automated vulnerability fix campaign. So creating a set of standards that define under a set of constraints what the open source security foundation considers to be compliant with what we want to see others in the industry doing. So in that context, Jordan, you have some opinions and perspectives, and I want to open the floor up to anybody who has or has not read this document to make comments, points, questions, anything. Go for it.
Yeah, so the document overall, I think, looks great. I think that where I think motivated by perhaps some philosophical differences or different priorities, right? I think that the way that y'all may be approaching it is slightly different than the way I would approach it. And that what I would probably think to do is say, okay, how can I divide, there's tons of projects and tons of maintainers. How can I first like divide those up into chunks and be like, which chunk is going to be the most effective in terms of getting the fix landed, but also like leaving the maintainer with a good taste in their mouth so that they want like not just so that they like OpenSSF or whoever's doing the campaign, not just so that they want to fix vulnerabilities, but so that when they think of security, they have a positive connotation. And it's very easy for maintainers to get a negative connotation about security right now. And that mental, like that attitude shift is what I think that's one of the things that causes the most insecurity in the ecosystem, is when people don't have positive, like warm fuzzies about security. And so I prioritize that rather highly as a result. So for example, some of the stuff Jonathan and I were talking about today and yesterday is for a maintainer who has enabled PVR on their repo, it's sort of a no-brainer, right? Like they have explicitly turned on a programmatic mechanism to receive vulnerability reports privately. Like, great, you're good. Like, report them. And anyone who's turned that on, like, you should just those are all repos that are no-brainers because somebody has. Yeah, thank you, Sandy, for clarifying the acronym. But like, that's somebody who knows enough about security to have turned it on and who like is prepared to receive the reports theoretically and will probably fix it. And there is then a separate group of folks that doesn't have it turned on and also doesn't have a security policy declared. And this is the group that doesn't know probably about security as opposed to having opinions or thoughts or whatever. And this is the group where you'd want to, like with the PVR group, you can just kind of be like, you have this turned on, here's a report. Like, how can we help? With the group that is completely like unaware, you would probably want to file an issue and be like, hey, there's this thing called PVR and here's why it's great and here's why you should use it. And we have a vulnerability to report, but we don't want to do it publicly for these reasons. And like, so it's sort of more of a like education thing and it's very automatable, but you'd still want to craft it in the form of like, let me teach you how this can be better for you and your users. And if you just click this button, we'll notice it and we'll send you your report and then we can fix it. Yay, right? And so like, those are two tranches that require slightly different approaches, but seem like no-brainers to me. But then when you get the tranche that I've been passionate about is the folks who may not have PVR enabled, sometimes because they can't enable it because you need admin or maintain access possibly on a repo to be able to enable it. And not everyone has that on projects they maintain. Former employees who still maintain their previous employer's projects, for example, or somebody who maintains the project of somebody else that's still on their user account. And that user like doesn't pay attention to their computer anymore, but the project is still maintained very well. Things like that. So, but then those users prior to PVR existing, the overwhelming best practice and what all of the players in the industry have been encouraging for a long time is, hey, please add a security policy. Please tell us in a prose document where to send these private vulnerability reports. And it could be an email address, it could be go to Tidelift or Sneak, or it could be go to HackerOne or whatever, right? And it is certainly a failing in the ecosystem that's the best we had, and PVR is better. But like, if somebody has taken the time to do that, especially bigger projects or busier maintainers that have built a process around that, I think it's important to try to respect that, even if it incurs the cost, like the trade-off of being less automatable. That's my little rant. I will be quiet now.
Anybody else have any perspectives they want to share on this topic? I think that the one thing that I think that we're generally in agreement. I think the one thing that I struggle with is that given that PVR is such a recently added feature, and it's actually only coming out of beta this month, like within the next the next week or two, it's still been a beta feature, right? The security.md format has been a feature of GitHub for several years now. So there may be a lot of projects that established a security.md file prior to this feature being available. And so they may not at that point consider turning on PVR. And so trying to go through a disclosure process following a process that was defined before PVR was even enabled and a possibility for them to enable, when it could just be as easy as asking them, hey, can you enable PVR so we can report there?
Yeah.
That seems like an additional lift that, especially when you're trying to automate at scale, right? If you can ask them to turn on PVR and then they say no, that's one thing. But if they say yes, then you've added one more project to the list of projects that you can automate for without too much overhead on your behalf as the person running this campaign.
Yeah, and you may even get more than one if it's all under an org, right? So for example, the reason that I started paying attention to this is I don't think it was related to this specific campaign, but somebody filed an issue on like 12 different NPM repos that I watch because I like suffering. And they basically saying, please, you know, like I have a vulnerability, I'd like to report it, where do I do it? And they were all closed with a link to the security policy by annoyed, overworked maintainers. And certainly an issue filed, one notification to the NPM people somewhere that says, hey, turn on a PVR for your org and we can report all these vulnerabilities that we have, would be valuable. But 12 is counterproductive. And so like, I don't know how to balance that, because like my example is I have 400 projects, but they're spread across less than 10 organizations and users. And so if I got 10 notifications, I'm going to be a lot less annoyed than if I get 400. And so maybe that's a way to balance a trade-off. So like, I agree with you, enabling PVR is a good thing, but like, I also would hope that as GitHub moves this out of beta, that they just enable it by default for all new repos and like upsell pretty heavily. Hey, please click this button and turn it on. Or alternatively, that they just turn it on for everyone. But like, you know, we're not in control of what they do with their product.
So you're suggesting that when we submit a pull request with a fix, it's at top level of the project, demonstrating all different locations that it is. So that way you're not getting, let's say 400, you're getting one per repo with the different locations and fixes.
I don't think
So
so.
unless,
Yeah,
yeah,
not
like
pull
the
request, an
PRs are
issue.
fine. I'm talking about like a PR is, I mean, if it needs to fix 400 places, then I need 400 PRs, right? Like it's more that like, if you're going to be notifying me and asking me to do work without contributing anything, like an issue saying, hey, please turn on PVR. Like I'm basically saying it would be nice if the identity of the humans receiving the request was taken into account, meaning like, for example, we have more than one notification queued up for this org. Let's only notify one place. And if we have further notifications, let's edit that issue and be like, it also applies to these repos and bullet point list. And like, and in that way, you're sort of, you're still notifying the right people, but you're not overloading them with notifications. Something to that effect. You know, that might be a compromise, right?
That works. It works really well if it's an if it's a company, but I have worked inside, I have been a part of organizations. For example, the Angular UI organization was a mixed bag of a bunch of people from a bunch of different projects that didn't crosstalk at all. And they had just ended up in the same, I don't know how they all ended up in the same organization, but like there was no central leadership over that organization.
Right.
It's just a landing page for a bunch of projects. And so like if you were to have gone to the .github for that project and said, hey, here in the .github, please open it.
That's a good place. Right.
There's probably nobody watching that repository except for the one person that created it to put something in there.
But that's fair. I do think that's probably a rare case, but also like, even in those cases, it's not destructive to enable. So it's like, all you need is one org owner to see that and be like, yeah, that's a good idea. And then go click a button and like, it's on for everyone in the org, regardless of whether there's central leadership. And that's not going to stop an individual project from then going and turning it off. But like, that's at that point, it's less like, yeah. And unfortunately, I doubt there's any way to see if it's turned on at the org level versus at the, you know what I mean? Like I doubt that as a non-owner of an org, you'll be able to see if an org has automatically turned it on for new repos or has clicked to the enable all button or like, you know what I mean? So
there is, well, at least for there are certain things like you can, I think there are certain things that are universally applicable. For example, if you have the setting, like OpenSSF has a setting that's like require signed commits, right? When you're committing via the web UI, and then all the summer projects, you can't turn it off, but it shows you that it's set as an org level permission or an org level setting. Sorry, the hiccups all of a sudden.
Yeah. And that would make sense if it was a requirement, but the way that GitHub is currently implemented at the org level is that you can check a box that sets the defaults for new repos, but then there's an enable all, disable all button that just stamps the setting onto everything. So if you click enable all and then somebody turns it off, like you'd have to infer that. You wouldn't be able to actually like determine that that's what had happened. I don't know. You're right. Like there's going to be, for anything there's going to be edge cases, right? It's or like counter examples. So I don't know what the best solution is. It's just kind of I think that, how would I put it? Maintainer burnout is a very big topic in open source, and like so is security. And I think that we can't have one without addressing the we can't address one without addressing the other in both cases, like in both directions. And so like I think it's worth delaying a tranche of projects in getting fixes or reports if it avoids adding to the burden on maintainers. That's a judgment call you don't have to agree on, right? But that's my intuition here.
I was still muted. Anybody else have any opinions on this from their own experience maintaining large organization projects or being part of organizations?
I wouldn't say large, but it's a hard thing to balance. The ideal thing would be if the repository hosts like GitHub, GitLab, etc., just supported having this be a more integrated feature and also having it be enabled by default. The feature being the private vulnerability reporting. I feel like from the maintainer perspective, if you have it be opt-out and it's a one-click opt-out, that's a reasonable balance. But obviously that requires support from whoever the host is. So, and there's also the question of what do we do in the meantime before these are implemented for the different platforms.
Jordan, do you have any opinions as this relates to other platforms other than GitHub, or is this all GitHub centric? Not that this is a bad
I
thing.
mean,
just checking.
yeah, I mean, I think a solution is always nice when it's not tied to a single provider or company. And there's lots of ways I want GitHub to be less like the single source of failure or whatever in the open source ecosystem. But GitHub, like open source is GitHub right now. So it's like that's not a justification for ignoring GitLab and friends. It's more just like, if we don't have GitHub, we haven't achieved anything. And if we do have GitHub, the rest are like often a rounding error. So it's like, it's important to bear that reality in mind, even if you're not happy about it.
Okay. So the ask here is that, let me just repeat it back to you. The ask here is that I struggle with the single report. I hear what you're saying where you end up, for example, right, Dependabot, right? You have a bunch of projects that all use the same dependency set, and then you end up with like 5 Dependabot pull requests across 6 repositories that across X number of repositories that are all fixing the same vulnerability, right? You can similarly end up with the same situation where you have the same report coming into multiple organizations that you all maintain. That can just get annoying, especially when it's please enable PVR, right? Please enable PVR, please enable PVR.
Well, Dependabot's a little like please enable PVR is one thing, but the fixes, right? Like the reason Dependabot is annoying and people turn it off a lot is because it affects every level of the dep graph because there's lock files everywhere instead of just having lock files at the app level. So like, but in this case, no matter if it's 100 levels deep or 2, you would still only have one PR doing the fix. Certainly releasing the fix would trigger a dependency update wave, but like I think the fixed PRs or even the reports of the vulnerability themselves are going to be targeted and not suffer from that problem.
Right.
It's just the please enable PVR thing is the one that I think could be spammy. And like, but I actually am not even that worried about that. If I have a repo that has no security policy and I have PVR off, and then someone says, hey, turn this on so I can report stuff, I'm going to be like, oh shit, thanks. Like, I didn't realize I had no way to do that. And so even if it's annoying because there's a lot, I'm going to be like, all right, well, I should have already done this, you know, but like I'm not going to have the same magnanimity if, you know, I've laboriously put a security policy into hundreds of repos and then I still have to go click another thing, even though I already told everyone how to do it, like how to report things. You know, that's the sort of,
So,
but like a fix is fine.
so you're saying that if you have multiple vulnerabilities
Mhm.
in a single organization, and there is a reporting policy at the org level, then open an issue only at the org level.
Oh no, I'm so honest. I'm like, so there's the 3 tranches I've talked about, and the only tranche that I think is a question is, has a security policy, does not have PVR.
What
And
about,
so within that, go ahead.
does it matter? So does it matter if the PVR is coming from the org level or the repository level? Because if it's coming from the repository level instead of the org level, doesn't that indicate that the project has a certain level of autonomy from the parent organization that is not causing it to be part of a standardized general policy set at the org level?
No, it might mean that the repo admin turned it on, but is not an org owner.
I'm saying the security.md file.
The
The presence of a security.md file being at the org level versus being in the repository individually. Does
sort
that
of.
give you a flag?
I have security.mds that are in repos that
Yes.
predate GitHub supporting an org level.github repo. And then I also have a GitHub org level.github repo with a security policy. So sometimes I have both just for
Right.
legacy reasons. But yeah, I agree. If there's no org level policy and there is a repo level policy, that suggests that, I don't know, that's worth considering differently. I don't know exactly what it suggests yet.
Because I mean, and also the problem is like, what if there's no .github organization too, right? Like there's no central reporting location then, right? It's like,
That's true.
I
But
don't
then
think
you could also just file one issue and be like, it also applies to these projects. Like, what do you want us to do? Right.
I
don't know.
yes, because like take for example the Apache Software Foundation, right? They have like, can you still hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. Take for example the Apache Software Foundation. There's like there's that like at least 1,000 repositories, right?
Yeah.
And they're all run by different
I think that is a very unique special case. I would probably hard code Apache like in it with its own logic.
I mean,
those
there's also the Eclipse Foundation, and there's probably other ones that have similar behavior that I don't know about, right? Like you may want to hard code special cases, but at a certain point, your special cases don't work because there are things you don't know about yet.
Right. I mean, I think the number of foundations or organizations that have truly like a lot of truly autonomous projects is like, I think that's not going to be that many. I mean, maybe double digits, but like not triple.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, that includes large organizations like Google and like those, because those projects are probably run under a single organization, but each of those teams could be very wildly disparate from.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect though that Google would enable PVR at a company level, and or would have a company-wide security policy, right? Like I think the foundation argument, like example, is one of the few cases where there wouldn't be an org-wide policy somehow.
Right.
I mean, it's good to bring this up, right? Like it's important to account for, you know, the different cases. It's just kind of like The open source is about the long tail of things, which largely is going to be an org with 1 to 5 projects or a user-owned repo. And so it's like, I think optimizing for that is important, right? Like the number of open source projects that live inside an enterprise company's GitHub org is probably not actually that large a percentage, even if it is the lion's share of the popular ones or something.
Um,
I don't know. I mean, I have no data, so just talking out
let
loud.
me, okay, so let me, I'm gonna screen share. Share screen. This document originally had legal come through it. Which means that some of the stuff got munged. Interesting ways. Okay. Vulnerability messaging, disclosure assistance.
Yeah, I think what I'm talking about currently goes in that hand wavy sentence. You should assess what this like
Private disclosure.
the case.
Yeah. If the OSS software hosting supports
Just a programmatic means of private reporting, something like that.
example.
And to what Michael was saying in Slack as well, if separately anyone, like whether it's OpenSSF or not, came up with a structured format for security.md that could point people programmatically at a disclosure mechanism, that would suffice as well. It's just that doesn't exist right now.
It doesn't. There is there's something that Luigi is working on in that department. It's
Okay.
it's a JSON specification, but I think that the problem with that is that it still has the multiplicative, like you also have to define adapters for every single different disclosure mechanism, HackerOne, BugCrowd, but then like even taking into mind Jira, right? Every single organization is running their own instance of Jira. It's not Bitbucket's central Jira instance. So you can't create a login account for Jira and report via that channel. You have to create an account for every single, like Jenkins is one and Apache's one, like all that. And that's that again, scale.
Yeah, I mean, but you could make the such a schema just not work for anything that isn't anonymously programmatically submittable or something. Like if it requires you to create an account, you don't put it in the schema because it's not good enough, right? Like the schema is just for scalable programmatic private vulnerability reporting. So that's either like a post endpoint or an email address or some static thing that says use GitHub PVR. I don't know, like whatever. Maybe GitHub has a thing. Because I mean, I think the reality is that if a project requires somebody to sign up for Jira to get a report, they're just not going to get reports anyway. So
yeah, is not enabled on the
vulnerable repository or something. I don't know. Yeah. And it doesn't matter for this sentence. It doesn't matter where the enablement comes from. It's just is it on or not?
Yeah. A public issue.
Like
Requesting?
advising of the existence of requesting. Yeah. But like I think it's useful to point out that the issue can advise that there is a vulnerability without saying what it is. Like it's important that it must not disclose the vulnerability, and it should imply, it should say that there is one,
right?
The
programmatic means of reporting is not enabled on the vulnerability repository a programmatic means of private reporting. Okay, the program means
Yeah,
of
private.
private reporting. Reporting is not enabled, then the public issue requesting the feature be enabled on the repository. Must be requested.
I don't know if there's a, I can't see because the little bubbles. There we go. Oh, I'm not muted.
No, you're not muted.
I was just talking to myself. I couldn't see, but because everyone's like typing, so it was
Mm,
like over what I was writing. I was like, did I have to add a space?
Something like that.
yeah. Um, um, if at this point, (3.a) what yeah 3.a yeah we have the so how do we want to structure, because you have a thing you want to communicate, which is like how to, so okay, if the vulnerability impacts multiple projects under the same GitHub or the same station.
I typed a sentence as well. You can use or discard it as you like. But I think I don't think we need to prescribe this as the advice for other people as much, because like at least until we've tried it and know what works. But like
So you're
basically just saying like
we shouldn't
think
make
about
that,
it.
we shouldn't make it policy that they have to follow the flow of like check for security.md in the organization. Then
No, like
then you're saying that should be only added after AO tries it. But
yeah, and vets it exactly.
okay, so then it should be.
But just I don't know, and we can provide examples. Like for example, like
Okay.
and
Okay.
so I don't know, something like I'm just kind of spitballing, but like you can't, we can't prescribe anything here because like we don't even know what the objective like rules would be, and we haven't even tried it out. So like even if we came up with something, it might be terrible, right? But like it's useful to kind of talk about here as so that the spirit, I think, and the intent is in there, and like as Alpha Omega gets better at figuring this out, we should of course tighten up these sorts of documents. But like I don't know what's stronger I would put in here that wouldn't be like overkill, you know?
I think that as that sentence is currently, it's overly vague.
Okay, that's fair.
Because like I don't know what it adds, and it just more adds confusion from my perspective.
I guess, I mean, that's fine. And if you want to delete it, go ahead. My thought is what it adds is that it like, okay, so I'm coming at this from a JavaScript spec angle a little bit here, is there's non-normative notes in the JavaScript spec that like engine implementers don't have to follow, but they clue in people to the intent of something or the possibility of optimization or of like an edge case to be aware of, so they don't optimize themselves into a bug and stuff like that. And that's sort of should and non-normative have the same semantic, right? And so that's sort of what I'm thinking is like, so just being like, hey, try not to be a dick here, and this is something to be aware of.
It's not just being a dick. It's also like,
Yeah.
that's not something most people would think about. They're just like, hey, let me just submit all these. And I don't realize it's the same
Right.
maintainer across the projects. So I think it adds a value of like, hey, think of your use cases and your edge cases, but also these are other ways that they have already described how to communicate to us. So the security.md file, and I think you had mentioned another one earlier of what to check, but I think it just helps folks point to
So
proper locations.
yes, I agree.
Mhm.
I think that this sentence is more useful if it provides an example.
That's totally fine. Like I said, it is just spitballing. Like we can
Right, right,
right,
be
100%.
more,
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So for
it can be fleshed
example,
out, and I'm happy to try and do that over time. And yeah, go ahead.
all right, sure. For example, um, instead of opening many issues across multiple,
In the same org or something.
that may be, I mean, users don't have .githubs, do they?
Yes, they do.
But can you have a security policy there?
Yes, you can. I do.
Okay. Or
I may be part of the reason that GitHub has that, but nonetheless, they have it.
cool. All right. Multiple repositories in the same user organization that may be appropriate for a single issue to be open, requesting as a example for GitHub, this would be the dot. Adding.
Mhm.
For a little bit more clarity, I think it could be at the top or something, but defining what an organization is, because most folks might think of it as a company and not think of a foundation as an organization. Or not realize that some source code management tools have separate organizations. Just
I'm
an
just using
idea.
that. I'm using the colloquialisms that are associated with GitHub. Do other source, like does GitLab and Bitbucket, use different terminology if they use organizations and repositories?
That's a good question. I can check.
Yeah, I mean, I think if that's a term that is going to be confusing to anybody, then I would say that all of OpenSSF documents should probably link to somewhere that defines it in detail.
Yes.
Just the first time that they use the word organization,
Yes.
and then we can kind of solve that problem for everyone.
There is a discussion.
Right.
Yeah, there is a discussion within the OpenSSF of creating a
Like a glossary or something.
glossary. Yeah.
So GitLab does, but nothing in Bitbucket in regards to an organization.
But like they might call it user or scope or namespace or I don't know, whatever. I can spit out the source words, but like I'm sure they have some discrete, like they have a 2-part slug, and I'm sure they have a name for the first part, right? GitHub actually calls it an owner in the API, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's just because I keep hearing and during the conversation organization, I keep thinking company. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I was like, maybe we should.
Makes sense.
But a glossary is 10 times better because we don't have to maintain it.
Yeah, right. Well, and it's also like every document will have the same problem.
Yeah.
Our the OpenSSF's .github is empty. Is there documentation about the .github feature that I can link to in this line?
Probably. Let's see.
I'm having a hard time tracking it down.
Yeah, it's hard to search for things with a dot in it. I'll find it and
Yes.
drop a link.
Thank you.
Apparently, security.md can be in the repo root, the docs, or the .github folder. So there's 3 places, probably in both
great.
repos that it could be. So here is a document about their default community help files. I'll put it in Zoom.
I saw that one, but I didn't.
And I got to that from the adding a security policy document, which is here.
Well, I'll just link to that for now.
Yeah. So yeah, because that one talks about security policy per repo and then has a link to the default one for the org or user. Yeah.
All right, we are currently 8 minutes to the top of the hour.
Matt has his hand raised.
Go for it. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I joined late, and pardon if this has been asked already. But you know, I know that there's a lot of talk about the Sterling toolchain, and I know that workflows are assumed to be part of it. And you know, despite talking about GitHub and GitHub Actions are going to be preeminently part of it as well. So can this be viewed as part of like a workflow file, a security workflow file, maybe not just a top level file as well, and be part of the Sterling toolchain where you declare what things you want OpenSSF specific workflows to look at or you'll be allowed to do?
I mean,
you're saying for whether or not, like, so open source projects are publishing a file or putting a file in their repository that is defining how the OpenSSF can interact with that repository.
Well, I think that's part of the discussion around Sterling toolchain, is that the assumption is we're going to take tools that we use in like Alpha and Omega and things to prove SALSA compliance, and they'll include GitHub Actions that are there for proving SALSA provenance, etc. That is that the direction is going to be a workflow that runs one or more actions to prove different compliance or different aspects around different things. So maybe AutoFix can be part of that Sterling toolchain. You opt in by adding actions or whatever. They can take the form of if you use Subversion or some proprietary thing or a different runner for your CI process, that's fine. But there could be still a signal file that runs your workload. And even if you choose for your workload to be run by an external runner, that file is still going to be picked up as part of a workflow.
So the idea, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I feel like part of the Sterling toolchain would have to be like something to the effect of follow your ecosystem's best practices for metadata, like a package JSON or a gem file or whatever. And similarly, have a license, have a security policy, right? Like in other words, there has to be something in there that talks about the various forms of metadata that are necessary for the toolchain to operate. And I would assume that part of that also includes enable private vulnerability reporting if your platform supports it.
Yeah. Hi, Jordan. So that's what we're working towards in the OpenJS Foundation, right? So we'll have prescriptive. So it would be great if that overlap or developed, like if we develop, tool chains, that those include, profiled tool chains for different languages or ecosystems. Absolutely. But it's not, but it would declare, that would be programmatic. It would be declared and it could be automated through a tool chain. So, yeah.
The idea behind this standard, right? This specification for defining an open source security foundation compliant automated vulnerability fix campaign. These campaigns are designed to be targeted beyond the scope of the projects that are aware of the OpenSSF, to include all open source projects across all open source, right? Like this is not just projects that are aware of the Sterling toolchain. This is any project that is open source can receive a pull request or some sort of contribution to fix a security vulnerability in a way that is defined by this process or by the specification.
Yeah. In my mind, declaring that I want this workflow for run as on certain events, that's not my opt-in. I declaratively put in a programmatic work directory structure a workflow saying, OpenSSF run my AutoFix workflow. That's my explicit permission to do that.
So yeah, so we're the design behind this is an opt-out mechanism where maintainers can choose to opt out of receiving these reports and receiving automated fixes like this, but they're opting out of receiving reports or automated fixes like this will still result in the vulnerability becoming public, right? They're opting out doesn't mean that they won't receive it, or their opting out will mean they will not receive it, but it will mean that their vulnerability immediately becomes public. That answer your question?
There's a yeah, well, that eliminates me on what the positioning is, but I opt, if you opt out is the mechanism and GitHub's gonna back it, then that's cool.
Well,
Fine.
GitHub's not backing that. It's like the way that we're thinking about leaning. So the way that I've done opt out for bulk pull request generation in the past is asking people if they want to opt out to create a .github file. Inside of their .github directory in their repository, they added a file called gh-robots.txt, and it lists which robots they want to not allow to interact with their repository. I'm leaning towards moving away from that standard, and then there's a new standard that's being developed by Luigi. Security insights, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with Luigi and Michael Scavetta before Alpha Mega Open. We talked about these things. So yeah, opt out is just kind of a new concept for open source. So
yeah, it's a new concept for security too, but we're trying to move that one forward too.
Understood. I'm just saying that when you're saying I'm forcing you this on the population, you will get resistance.
Oh yes. No. We are in complete agreement on that. And so something that I mentioned early in the talk, I'm 7,000 pull requests, automated security fix pull requests into this across my career. So very familiar with that. And that's part of the reason we want to include maintainers in this discussion, is to make sure that we're doing this in such a way that is respectful of the maintainer and doesn't, like it won't be opt-in, it will be opt-out, but we want to do it in such a way that decreases the likelihood of them trying to opt out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look to Jordan representing, because he's the voice of the individual in the OpenJS Foundation and package communities. So, if he's okay with it, then I'm okay with it.
Right. The biggest
we're working on being okay with it.
Yeah. The biggest pushback I've gotten from any organization, I've been targeting mostly the Java ecosystem with my work, and the Apache Software Foundation. Those maintainers have not been. Everybody else has been very receptive and positive, and just thank you for the pull request and moved on. The most negative reactions I've gotten is from the ASF maintainers. So there's this pull request, the security insight spec, which is adding. Luigi is proposing to add some of these fields, like accepts bot pull requests. I'm going to try to move away from the term bot, because bot has a negative connotation in the industry, and we want to go towards automated pull requests, because I'm not a bot. I use my real account to generate these pull requests. I use automation against my account to do it, but it is coming from me. And if you post a comment saying, "What the hell are you doing?" I will actually respond saying, no, I am a real person. Like, this is actually me, but like I had to use automation to generate these pull requests. So
I would say that as long as there's an identity, this will help with your opt out. As long as there's clearly an identity saying, with a person behind it saying, email this person, there's somebody saying, contact this person, look at a person behind it.
Yes. Let me put this in the here, Josh, can you put this? I lost track of the notes. Can you put this in the meeting notes? Where's the chat? There it is. This is there we go, found it. That's the link to the.
I actually need to drop. So thanks everyone. I'll see you next time.
All right. See you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you all for coming.
See you.
Bye. And Matt, if you wouldn't,
Right,
just to add your name to the
I did.
attendees. Thank you. All right.
I also fixed the date. The date was copied and pasted for today's date.
Thank you. Thank you. Now that you mentioned I did that wrong. You're right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
All right.